that the council has accepted and start brainstorming where are our next steps. I know you and I have talked about this before. If you could just sort of do like an overarching,
Sure.
and if you could talk a little bit about how the data was collected.
Yes.
I think some folks at home might be curious about that.
Yeah,
And then we can
absolutely.
kind of
Yeah,
take it from there.
absolutely. So, and I know I've done this before, so I will do it kind of quickly, but please stop me and if you have questions. So the summary of findings, and I want to just remind everybody because it's fascinating. I just left my office and I was reading the current Business Courier, which is talking about a cooling of the housing market. So this is a document that was created sort of at the height of what is still a very strong housing market in Norwood. Norwood was one of the fastest price appreciation markets in the county between 19 and 2022. I'm going to talk a little bit about homeownership rates, and I know that's something that people have been interested in, and so I want to talk about those findings. I want to talk in some detail about Xavier student housing, what's happening there and what that's doing to the market. And in full disclosure, I'm here as the Community Building Institute, but I also live at Xavier, and so I have kind of two hats in that regard. I want to talk about the strain on households making less than $50,000 a year. And then what it might mean to create some new products in Norwood, new kinds of housing types. In 2020, so maybe this is when I'll start the data, because the majority of the socioeconomic data in the document is from 2015-19 American Community Survey. That is census data that's created on a 5-year rolling average for cities across the country. In some cases, the 2020 population numbers were delivered just as we were finishing the document, and so we have included 2020 numbers as well, not in all of the document, but in population, race, those kinds of sort of the big categories, just to make sure that you get that the majority of the document is 2015-2019 American Community Survey findings. And there are 2020 numbers in the document around demographics and race because they became available. The other data point that we used is the multiple listing service data points, and we also use Zillow when we are talking about housing prices, sort of the housing market, because those numbers are available in real time on an annual basis, and they're much more current and much more realistic than the census numbers. So for the majority of the document where we're talking about people, we're using census numbers. For those components of the document where the data is talking about housing markets, rent ranges, prices, sale prices, those are mostly multiple listing service and Zillow numbers. And hopefully you will find those citations at the end of every table so that you'll know which is which. And when we use 2020 numbers, we cited them as well.
Liz, I'm curious about the auditors' information, if any of that was useful.
So auditors' files track sales once they've happened. They tend to have a lag in them. Multiple listing services have price on market, and then auditors are sale prices. Zillow's recording both. And so we don't usually use the auditor because it's a little bit of a lag. We're using Zillow and MLS listings more often. And, you know, one could ask, in years past, in the olden days, housing market, an asking price, which is what's listed in the MLS, might not have been what the sale price was. The auditors are reflecting real sale prices on closed deals. In this market, they might have even been lower, like the ask might have been lower than the final sale price, but Zillow is reflecting final sale prices.
Okay, thank you.
So maybe that's enough about data, but if there's more and if you have detailed questions, I'm happy to respond to them. So there are 19,043 people in Norwood as of the 2020 census. That's a slight decline from 2020, but I want to tell you that all of the loss was between 2020 and 2010. Between 2010 and 2020, you actually grew in population. So the overall loss is the early part of the period, not the late part of the period. Your population is getting more diverse. 12% of the population is Black today, 6% is Latino. Those are both up. There's a growing, and this is not unusual, it's common in lots of jurisdictions in Hamilton County. The most quickly growing kind of household in Norwood is single people households. You have a lot because you have students, but students are often in multiple person households too. Single person household really means one person in the household. It's a senior, it's a single person. Students end up getting counted as group quarters, like if there are 4 students in a house, they're counted as 4 people in a group quarters, so.
Even if it's like a single family home, like considered?
Yeah, yes, that's
Okay.
right. The home is a single family home, but the number of people in the household, it's like if it was a family of 4,
Okay.
mom, dad, and 2 kids, it would be the same thing. It's still a 4-person household. Households are younger in Norwood than they are typically in Hamilton County. And you'll see the demographic summary. In a lot of places, you see Xavier student influence. It's a younger population. There are more singles. There are more non-family households. That's true of Norwood, but but the student population certainly skews those numbers to some extent. It gives you a much younger population than other suburban communities in the county, for better or worse. Now talking about housing stock, about half, 54% of the houses in Norwood are single-family homes. 28% are small multis, 2, 3, 4s, up to probably, I think, up to 9. 15% are specifically 2s, and you have less than 2% of your housing stock in larger multis, which is over 20 units, and very small in big multis, like 50 units, like you don't have one. So you have a relatively low-density, walkable community, which I think is part of the charm of Norwood, to be honest. Very strong single-family home sale prices, very active market. For the first time over the last 5 years, Norwood has new product. You have Carpenter Flats, University Station, Factory 52. For a very long time, there was not new product in Norwood. So these new housing starts have been significant, show up in the data. We also have a significant amount of renovation activity going on, which I think is a good thing. So now I want to go to homeownership, and I know people have expressed questions about the findings. You have a drop in homeownership rate, a drop of 9%, and I think that's largely reflective of the new apartments at University Station and Carpenter Flats. You added a significant number of multifamily units that you didn't have before. And so because your housing market isn't huge, 2 projects like that make a big difference. You have a rise in homeownership rates in what I would call the core of the community. So there are more single-family homeowners, there are more even 2s that are owned by homeowners. So, and pretty significantly, in the area between Regent and Ellesmere, it was a 45% increase in homeownership rate. In the area between Elm and Mills, sort of west of the high school, a 33% increase in homeownership rate. So I think you're definitely seeing single-family housing moving from renter to owner. The decrease is because you have this big influx of hundreds of units of rental property. In addition to home values going up, your rental rates are going up. Between 15 and 19, the rental rates went up about 140%, which is significant. But it isn't significantly different than other Hamilton County communities. Rents are going up and home values are going up, which is sort of a double whammy if you're a household making less than $50,000 a year, which is what I indicated earlier. I'll just give you some numbers around student housing just to get a sense of it. Based on a long conversation, between Xavier and Norwood. We know that you'd like to have our students on campus or closer to campus, not in single-family homes. So we've been trying to get ourselves there. We built 535 beds on campus. Justice Hall opened in 2011. That was 535 new on-campus units. University Station, between Phase 1 and Phase 2, has 227 units. And so we are building more close to campus. At the same time, our enrollment is growing. So we're trying to keep pace, but there are certainly, and so what I will tell you is we've probably got precisely 2,317 students on campus and a population of about 5,000 students. So roughly half of our students are in the community. Most of them in Norwood, some of them, increasingly more of them, in Evanston.
Is there data on single-family homes being bought and turned into Xavier rentals?
I don't have those numbers. I suspect that it's actually going the other way right now. I think that there is, and actually, I will say, from Xavier's standpoint, I'm starting folks on campus, our students aren't going to be able to afford to live in Norwood forever. We've got something in the neighborhood of 2,000 students in the community, and they are going to get priced out of the market. Because we're seeing those homeownership rates change. That change is a reflection of people buying rental properties and renovating them and moving in as homeowners, which is a good thing. It just is a changing dynamic, right? So I think right now there's roughly 2,000 students out in the community, which is probably not a significant change, even though we've built like 800 beds. I think that our campus is not ever, well, I shouldn't say not ever. It is not our intention to be a 10,000 enrollment campus, but certainly to grow. So I think we're trying to understand what that balance is in conversation with you all.
Yeah, and I would say, we enjoy having students in Norwood, but definitely finding that balance of it not over-consuming.
Yep,
'Cause
exactly.
it's great. I've met some great Xavier students that live right down the street from the garden and all that. So
Yeah.
it's good interactions to have, but it's definitely that,
And
what's the balance?
That's right, and I think that's just about an ongoing conversation. My sense is, and Jean Griffin is our Dean of Students, and she's really wonderful, and my sense is that we've had a lot more conversation, both among our police departments and among administration and Norwood folks, just how's it going, when stuff is not going well, let us know, what do we do, all of that sort of stuff. And, if it's too much, then what are the other options? Because we too, University Station for Xavier is our first, we don't own University Station, it's owned by Dynamont, which is Messer and an owner group. And we have to balance, we want to make sure our dorms are full, so it's all of that. And I think it's incumbent on all of us to just keep having a conversation. When is it too much? Where are we having problems? All that sort of stuff. But as I said, right now, in round numbers, there are probably something like 2,000 students in the community, most of them in Norwood.
Okay.
And it's interesting because there are more students in Evanston than there have been, and that housing value is going up as well. So I can see a time when our students are going to have a really hard time competing in both of those housing markets.
Well, and the
So-
data with this too, it was really interesting how you showed when University Station went in, how rent went up by about $200
Absolutely.
in general because of that.
Because the numbers aren't huge, so when you add 200 units, it makes a big difference. As I said, there's new product in the market in ways that there has not been in a long time in Norwood. And I would say it's certainly the multifamily. I haven't talked about Factory 52 yet, but that becomes a big impact in a positive way as well. There's also a lot of historic home renovation, new investment being attracted to historic homes, which is a good thing. It is meaning there are fewer rentals, and not just for students, again, but for households making less than $50,000 a year. They're having increasingly more difficulty finding housing that used to be available in Norwood, still available for them. Let's see, I don't want to go through all of this, but, so we use the term often when we talk about strain on households making less than $50,000 a year. We use a term called cost burdened, which means households who are spending over 30% of their income on their housing. Households that are severely cost burdened are spending over 50% of their income on their housing. And those households are growing in Norwood. So there are increasingly more cost burdened households in Norwood. You have, and the naturally occurring affordable housing in Norwood, that's really valuable, I think, is your 2 families, 4 families. Those are sort of naturally occurring affordable housing. And sometimes when it's in bad shape, it's a problem, but when it's in good shape, it's really nice affordable housing that already fits into the neighborhood, doesn't require new construction, all that sort of stuff. You have 64 federally assisted, rental assisted housing units, and as of July, so a year ago now, or almost a year ago, July 21, we had 224 housing choice voucher units. So in other words, those were private market units where the landlord accepted a voucher. So maybe I'll go through sort of the core of the recommendations, and then I'm going to stop and ask just for, I'm happy to have more of a conversation. To encourage a wider range of housing product types, and I don't mean huge multifamily buildings, I mean maybe considering accessory dwelling units, considering 2s and 3s, trying to renovate those as 2s and 3s instead of everybody back to single families. I think the Carpenter Flat model, the Factory 52 model, all of those are adding new product types to Norwood that didn't exist in the past. And consider that your fastest growing household type is single person households. And that's not all students, it's probably lots seniors too. We heard in interviews was that seniors who want to stay in Norwood don't feel like they have options. They can't, there isn't really anywhere to go if they want to get out of their big house. Creating a network of supports for Norwood families, not just in Norwood, throughout the county. There are increasingly families who are cost burdened and struggling in suburban communities who don't know how to access resources and services. And so often the local community, the city of Norwood, is the first place somebody calls when they say, I'm going to have a hard time with my utilities this month, or I'm going to have a hard time with XYZ, I'm worried about eviction. If Norwood doesn't have to provide services, but if you can be a referral service, that can be a really powerful, helpful thing for residents. The other recommendation is to maximize limited redevelopment sites in the community to the community's benefit. So I'm going to pick on Quality Inn because I know there's not a deal right there. But, so Factory 52 was a perfect example of an underdeveloped, obsolete use. Not that you was playing card in the day was the where everybody worked and they walked there, and that was a really good thing. When it was vacant, it's an obsolete site. You have a number of those sites in the community, and you want to make sure that you're maximizing those sites so that you get what you want out of them, and they become the kind of uses that you want them to be. And we can come back to that. Development standards for develop standard incentives packages. Often what happens when developers negotiate with Norwood is they negotiate with Norwood, they negotiate with the schools, and it's a lot of individual sort of one-on-one negotiations. If there was an agreement between the city and the schools and a more standard incentive, if you do this, you're going to get this. If you do this, you're going to get this. And developers and everybody else knew what that was, it would make the process easier and probably quicker. Code enforcement to create a residential improvement program. Code enforcement and in Norwood, people are investing in housing in ways that they didn't in the past, keeping housing in good condition so that Norwood's image is good and so that people live in decent housing is a good thing. Often what happens when you get aggressive with code enforcement is longtime homeowners who don't have the resources to improve their housing get in a real bind. And that's one of the things that leads to people selling their property when they don't want to, or when they do, or for less than it's worth, and all that sort of stuff. So, we are recommending this in county, or in communities throughout the county. Code enforcement that's coupled with care improvement program that provides resources for longtime homeowners who need the help. And here I'm gonna, because I'm almost done, so I will say this in context here. The reason this report was completed in the first place was that the county reached out to communities in the county and said, we'd like communities who are interested to think more creatively about how they might make CDBG allocation requests, this is before all of the ARPA money was available at the county and other resources that are now available to the county, to say, we'd really like communities to think creatively about how to use these resources and how to use them in ways that would best support their objectives. So, communities in Hamilton County, who wants to do that? And if you'd like resources, technical assistance from LISC and the Community Building Institute, we'll support that for you. So that's what that's about. So when I say, I'm thinking of it here when I talk about code enforcement, the county is going to put together a homeowner improvement program that will be able to be accessed by multiple communities. So there will be resources available at the county level. I can't give you a whole lot more detail than that, but they're working on what it will look like, who will be eligible, how the programs will run. And I think what will happen is they want local communities to be the ones who are identifying homeowners who need the support.
Liz, would this be something like people working cooperatively?
Yes, but probably with more resources that came directly out of county CDBG funds or other ARPA funds, those kind of things, and probably would have more local connection to identifying needed households. PwC, people make requests to them. Here we're going to say, if code enforcement has identified 6 households who need to make improvements, clearly don't have resources, then the Norwood is going to be the go-between.
Okay.
And I wish I could give you more details, but that's what the county is working on right now. So I think the county has every intention of helping support communities on a number of these recommendations. So maybe that's enough for now. I'm sorry, that was
No.
way more than enough. And I'm happy to answer questions. I just ran through sort of the highlights. There's more information in the full document, which you have. And I know LISC is available when Kristen doesn't have a neck injury. And, LISC is available, we're available. And, I always say CBI is a special partner in Norwood because we live here, so, yeah.
This might be just the quickest, easy one, is this network of support.
Yeah.
Would that basically be a referral listing?
Yes.
And then we could just put that on the website? Like, that feels like a pretty...
Yes, and I think yes. And I think that maybe even to legal aid, to community action agency, to jobs and family services. I mean, there are millions of dollars being allocated to support renters who are in eviction problems, homeowners who are in foreclosure problems. There are millions of dollars in resources. Primarily, those resources are coming from CAA and Jobs and Family Services, the county as well. Legal aid has been very engaged. They are a partner. Lydia's House is a local CDC that you guys can rely on. They're also well connected to support for a particular market. I mean, they're working on young moms with babes, but they have relationships. So I think it's as much about, you call it warm handoff. It's like saying to somebody who's panicked about getting foreclosed on, it's legal aid, but it's Stephanie Mose, and here's her number, and, I don't pick on Stephanie tonight, but call Stephanie directly, but she...
Here's her cell phone.
Yeah, exactly, but it's that kind of warm handoff, and I think, and it's not just in Norwood, it is in communities all over Hamilton County. People know you, they're close to you, you're their community, so much easier sometimes to connect with you than to go to, CAA and get in line. Not that they don't eventually have to do that, but yeah.
So maybe having a standard list of all those resources here at the schools, at the health department, online. If someone were to call the building department or Lisa or HR, they have those numbers
Yep.
right there and say, you can call this number. Just so it's,
Yep, I think that's exactly right. And the schools are a really important partner of yours. I mean, your schools have great connections to their families, and they really know their families, and they're a great connection. And a lot of the people who need supports are their families. And so, making sure that they're in the loop and that you guys are having conversations with them, I think is really productive.
It feels like a nice, easy, we can do that, beginning, middle, and end.
And it's meaningful to people. I mean, when you're in panic mode, it's nice to have some human to reach out to.
yeah. And I know it was mentioned in the last council meeting, committee of the whole, the diversity, equality, and
inclusion.
bringing in the schools for that. So I think that, the schools are a great resource there, so.
They really are a great resource for you. I mean, I think a lot of Norwood schools, they do a great job.
I'm sure we can just send an email out and they would just, here's our resources we have, everyone just kind of come, put it all in one, and it's standard.
Document, and then,
Yeah.
that's a really good idea. Okay. I really want to talk about auxiliary dwellings, because
Yeah.
I've done, when you first brought it up, it sort of piqued my interest, so I've been doing some reading about it. And I know there's a bunch of communities that have done like pilot projects. I was going to try to pull it up. 'Cause I've stayed in one in Portland. They were a pilot. And Barnstable, Massachusetts. I think Santa Cruz, Lexington, Massachusetts, and Santa Cruz, California. So they all were part of that pilot for doing that, especially since we do have the capacity to put some of these dwellings like above the garage or in the back. What I've not seen is some of the, what is the potential cons? I've heard parking, but I'm not sure that that's really a problem. Use of the infrastructure, the sewer lines and that sort of things. Is there much information out there about that?
So I wish that my list partners were here. Valerie Daly is becoming an expert on ADUs or accessory dwelling
awesome.
units. She's really been connected with sort of the best practices across the country. I think the concerns that people single into a double, but there are all kinds of ways that you can decide how you want, what's the appropriate specifications for an accessory dwelling unit. And there's lots of models out there, no more than 20% of the size of the original building, has to be located in a certain way. You don't want to have too much. So it's interesting because parking, people say they worry about parking, but you don't want people to like pave the front yard so there's enough for park. So you want, the intent behind, generally, the intent behind accessory dwellings is that you wouldn't know that it was there. It reads physically like a single family unit. And it provides for, your 20-somethings, seniors, maybe. So the question is, does it have to be somebody related to you? Does it have to be somebody connected to you? Can it just be you wanting to get an extra $600 a month of your household income? I don't think that's a bad thing. So I think that the mostly what accessory dwelling units, the property still reads like a single family home. And there's all kinds of ways you can accomplish that. And it really provides a great resource, particularly, I think when people talk about density in suburban communities, everyone goes, no, we don't want to do that. But accessory dwelling units are a great way to provide additional product types, homes for seniors, homes for people who just don't want, Norwood, the houses, not all of them, but many of them are big. This is a big, single-family historic product. Not everybody wants 4,000 square feet. And so it's a way to grow the number of units you have, expand the product types that you have without creating a bunch more multifamily housing. And again, don't call Valerie Daly directly, but Valerie is really becoming a local expert on the topic, and I know LISC has done a ton of research on best practices nationally and the pilot programs, and I know a number of other communities are interested in the
model.
And, I mean, the other thing about it is when it is zoning or a regulatory change that you make, it isn't like Norwood has to write a check. It's making a regulatory change which provides a different opportunity, but you're not directly subsidizing it. You're just creating the latitude in your regulatory framework.
Does Cincinnati currently does not allow?
They do
them?
not, and
Okay.
they are also considering it. And I think for exactly the same reasons you are. It's exactly the same conversation. Yeah. And I will just, while we're in this little zone here, make a pitch for the Cincinnati and Norwood fours. I mean, those four-family units are your affordable housing. And when they are in good shape, they're a great resource. When they're in bad shape, then code enforcement needs to address them and property owners need to address them. It does, just to say four families are a great resource doesn't mean you have to put up with units in bad condition. But it does mean, I think there has been over the years a move to say, oh, this is just an obsolete housing type and we ought to be demolishing them. It's really a useful housing type and it's a great affordable housing type that fits into most neighborhoods pretty comfortably. And your neighborhoods pretty comfortably.
I actually live next door to a four-family that has been overall really lovely.
And
Good
when-
landlord, I think, makes a big difference.
Well, absolutely. And I mean, the extent to which it can be local owners for whom it's a business, they cash flow. I mean, if they're properly maintained and you're not turning them over like crazy because you have long-term tenants, they're a good investment.
So how could we, I think you might have said how many four families we have in the city.
I do know,
Thought you
but I
said.
can't say it right off the top of my head. I think it's in the document, and I think that,
20% multifamily, but
No, maybe not the four.
oh, I'll find it for you and send it to you.
Okay,
It's, I'll
So
send it to
what
you.
could we do with the stock that we currently have of those four families to help?
Well, so it can be, so you might want to figure out if there are units that are in bad shape, whether, encourage existing owners to sell so that somebody could make appropriate repairs. Maybe there are lending products that banks make available that are specifically targeted. I mean, it can be hard to get financing to renovate those kind of units because people don't get, it's not a traditional single-family unit or a big, huge multifamily project, which is what banks understand how to lend to. Creating lending product that work, creating some kind of incentive to property owners to make improvements, to keep rents relatively affordable, that sort of thing. I mean, even just advertising, we love our fours.
it's kind of, I've been wanting to pick your brain on this, but when it comes to like those CRAs or those incentives.
Yes.
And looking at Norwood as a whole, and there's a lot of zoning ordinances mentioned in this, which Norwood right now, I mean, the last time it was updated was 2014.
Yep.
But really looking at that as a whole, and then you also mentioned like, okay, this area has increased by 45% when it comes to, single-family homes owning
Yep.
it. What are the thoughts or what is the process of redirecting and saying, hey, this area in Norwood, like we're looking at residential housing, they're doing fine. They don't really need that incentive. And really taking that money that we might be giving out and really focusing it on areas, is that something?
You can
looking at
make
that big
those
picture?
policies, yeah.
But I mean, what would that take? I mean, Norwood and the zoning and all of that. Would it take like a third party coming in and kind of doing that audit and saying, this is where you're currently at, where we kind of get a good picture of it? Or do we already know that and we can already kind of
So there are a couple of, so I'm going to pick on a place where I really know because I've been thinking about it. There are a whole slew of 4 families on
Park Avenue.
Park where Factory 52 is, and most of them are in really good condition.
Yeah.
It's like if there were some way to say, we're going to do some streetscaping here to enhance what's going on, and we're going to put some kind of, we're going to focus, we're going to really advertise CRAs here so that landlords know that if they make improvements, they're going to get this benefit. That's one way. I mean, incentives. And Norwood has been effective at using their CRA, generally speaking. If you wanted to tailor it more, you could do that. I mean, that's a policy decision that council makes. You could just, zoning, so if you permit accessory dwelling units, suddenly you've made a big change without writing a check. If you tailor the way you use Community Reinvestment Act funds, or you make those incentives available, you've done something without writing a check. I mean, you can signal, I mean, I think there was a bit of a slow start with CRAs initially, and it was because people didn't know about it. People have a much better sense of it now, but you could be tailoring it even more, or advertising it even more, or working with some of your local lenders to say, we want you to be aware of these CRAs, and we want to, we hope that there would be a product for renovating 2s and 4s. I mean, and then you advertise that stuff. I mean, some of it doesn't have to be write a check or change the zoning code. Some of it just has to be incentives that are provided and that people know about. The thing about 2s and 4s that I think nobody wants to go through a big rezoning and build 200 new affordable units in their neighborhood. So that's not the question. The question is, how do you hold on to what you have and maybe improve it and create more of it in the buildings that are already here, and in ways that help those property owners who are local. We haven't talked about REITs or out-of-town owners, but who are local, to be doing the right things and having a good business, having a good small business for themselves. If you own 3 or 4 4s and they're well-maintained and you have long-term tenants, you're probably doing all right. Local owners to be doing those kind of things.
I keep thinking of the Greater Cincinnati Real Estate Group, and they're still brainstorming it, but they're wanting to develop kind of a mentor program for those local owners, like walking by that building and
Absolutely.
which I think would be great for Norwood. It's not impacted yet.
That's a good idea.
So I just think of like advertising, like, calling the city for resources, like, hey, I'm interested in this building, okay, like contact this.
Yeah, I've been thinking about these kinds of product types for a long time, and it's everything from things like, and I'm not going to say this articulately, but there are ways to upgrade heating and cooling that are much more efficient than other ways. And so do you know the contractors who know how to do this work? There are ways to turn 4s into 2s that make them available for maybe 2 or 3 bedrooms instead of 1 bedroom. I mean, and there are contractors who know how to do that work and contractors who do not. And so just creating exactly what you're saying, the kind of technical assistance supports for owners around lending, around renovation, around, how you manage the buildings, all that sort of stuff. How you do credit checks.
I mean, they already do that. That group does, and I know
Right.
they reach out to a lot of.
Absolutely.
I know owners in Norwood have already mentioned that they.
And that's a great resource. And so maybe, again, it's not you, Norwood, the city of, who does the thing, but it is you who's incentivizing the other technical providers, lenders, to sort of pool your resources in ways that local businesses can take advantage of, local owners can take advantage of.
Outside of the auxiliary housing, any other ideas on that? Kind of that first thing with encouraging the wider range of housing product types. So
the one other thing I will say, and I will go to Factory 52, which I think is a great opportunity for you all. There will be multiple phases. Do you want some affordability in one of them? What do you want to happen at the Quality Inn? there are, you have, a limited number of those kind of redevelopment sites. What do you want to do to maximize them? And so that is, I mean, you are a council committee, that is about persuasion, right? You might not have a regulation that would force someone to do something, and maybe that's not appropriate, you don't want to force people to do things. But HCDC or Alloy, I have to say it right, I know has been a partner of yours on the ongoing conversation around the Quality Inn. Let everybody know what the intent is there. It's a big site, it's an important site, it's right there at the lateral. It's been an eyesore for a long time, but it's a pretty desirable site potentially. What does Norwood want to see happen? I mean, I think communities get in a position where they just respond. You respond to developers, either we like it or we don't like
Reactive.
it.
So that would be more of a PUD for that.
More of a proactive response. We'd like, we think this is, I'm making stuff up now, we think this is a mixed-use site,
Yeah.
which should include housing, which should be placed on Montgomery Road, not set back, should be, I don't know if you want more structured parking, but you as the committee could say, this is what we want to accomplish on this important site, in a proactive sort of way, as opposed to just reacting to whatever a developer brings you. And I think Alloy, as your partner there, I mean, they would be helpful there, right? I mean, so you're not just negotiating for a sale to get it out of the current owner's hands because it's been a blighted site for a long time. You want it to be something bigger than that. You want it to be, you have some objectives here, and these are they. And so developers respond to us. I think that's the kind of, we've said, I mean, Xavier owns Norwood Plaza. We need to be in conversation about what the long-term reuse of that is. And I think, you could just say what you want. Doesn't mean you're gonna regulate what happens or you're gonna force someone to do what you say. But, yeah, I think it's worth a conversation. And I think that, as I said, you have a limited number of those sites, so you really want to maximize how it goes. Because when they're done, they're done. I mean, when they're redeveloped, they're redeveloped.
Would you anticipate there being a pushback for a conversation about the auxiliary housing?
Sure. Yeah, I mean, there always will be, because change is change.
Change is hard. Change is scary.
Of course, people will always say, why? I think the answer is because it really expands what's available, it expands what's available to seniors, it makes homeownership more affordable for people making less than $75,000 a year. I mean, it does a lot of the things that the community would like to see happen. And it's it's like, we haven't done it before, so I don't know what it looks like, and I'm not sure how happy I'm gonna be about that. But, to the point you made, so let's do a pilot here and there and see how it goes, and then people will go,
Test it out.
well, that's not so bad, that's not the end of the world.
Yeah.
I mean, I think you could walk through that. Oh, students will live there and they'll be terrible, I mean, maybe, I mean, those will be those will
right.
be,
Test it out, see what works, what doesn't work,
right,
go through that process.
yeah. I mean,
And in
maybe,
different parts of the city, it might be different.
I mean, maybe it's to say, we would only do it in the really low density, like the biggest residential lots, or maybe we find that's not, we want to do it in mid-density lots. I mean, you have all kinds of options there.
I know there's always, I feel like an anxiety at some point with residents and students, but that ancillary dwelling, I mean, that, like you mentioned, I would say the main single person in Norwood, which I've heard multiple times, it's like, I don't know how to downsize. It's people over 65, they want to stay in
That's right.
Norwood, and they're moving elsewhere because there's
There
nowhere else
isn't
to
really an
go.
option, right.
And, I mean, to me, like, that is a big solution.
And there are also, I mean, the flip side of that is, and the fact that Xavier is here means if there's a senior who wants to stay in their unit, but they can't do that without somebody mowing their lawn and taking them to the grocery. Suddenly, if you have an accessory dwelling unit, you have some additional income, and, I don't mean to be a Pollyanna, but maybe you have somebody who's supporting a senior household. So, I mean, I think there's all kinds of positive ways to look at it. But yes, there'll be pushback because change is change.
I feel like it would be important to have some community discussions around what people would want to see in terms of
Yeah.
like how we could roll. So there is also full understanding of what that would be and wouldn't be.
Yeah.
So I think that feels important, and to have some experts to come and talk about what that would look
Yeah.
like.
I mean, it's a conversation that's happening nationally, certainly locally. And it feels like a much more reasoned step than everybody has to have 5-story buildings all the way up and down Montgomery Road, which nobody wants. So
Okay.
maybe 1 or 2,
Yeah.
maybe at the Quality Insight, I don't know.
So the couple of things that I've written down, so we've got the increase the housing stock, which would be the auxiliary, and to take a look at the 4-family units. I'm wondering if we have a list of all the 4 families, that, if that would be helpful to take a look at all of them.
I might. It's not, I know we didn't do it in this document, I'm just trying to think. We did, CBI did, Xavier did, a housing inventory. It's old. I don't know, have you guys seen the thing that we did in the early 2000s?
No.
All right, we have a whole series of work that we've done over the years, and one of them has a detailed building condition map with housing types in it. I don't know if it is exactly what you're asking me, but I think it maybe is. So let me look at that, and I'll send it to you guys as well.
Okay.
And it's old, so it would have to be updated, but it's a start.
Could drive by and.
Yeah, yeah.
In terms of like financing to help those folks remodel, creating new lending product, do you have any direction on where to go for that, for people who
Well,
are
I
in the
mean,
banking
it's about,
world?
the first answer is who's lending in Norwood right now? Who is active in this market? I mean, there are certainly, Northside Bank and Trust has been particularly flexible in other communities in Cincinnati. There are other lenders who are learning to be flexible. You just always feel like you're, working against one trend or another. Obviously, after the foreclosure crisis in 2008, which has now been, over 10 years ago, there was a real contraction in the kinds of products that were being made available and the credit scores that were getting lent to. And I think we're still living with that today. I think it's finding lenders who have, who are making loans in Norwood and who are, maybe it's back to the area board of realtors who's trying to figure out how to create technical assistance for 4-family owners and saying, who are your lenders? And can we bring those folks into Norwood? And can we figure out how to create product that works for folks here?
Yeah, so I was wondering, how do we find out who the lenders are? Is that
So we asked the realtors.
Yep.
realtors?
And, I mean, ask owners in town that who did your loan? Who's willing to do a loan?
Yeah.
I mean, the nice thing about Norwood is that it is of a size that you can get to people and that people know each other and they know their banker and they know their realtor. And so, for the most part, I'm not, I know it's not Mayberry, but there are relationships. And so that's an advantage when you're saying, who did your loan? And, can we have a conversation?
John Braden owns a lot of
Property.
properties, and then so does our treasurer.
So how does that work, and how does that work for them, and how can we make that work for others?
This just kind of came up, and I was just wondering if other cities have a process for this or how to go about it. But like, if you see people renovating and doing that, and you're losing an affordable house, and they we're gonna up the rent and we're not going to take vouchers. How do other cities address that to ensure that you don't wipe out those
It's-
housing?
That's
units?
really hard. When it's in the private market like that, it's really hard. One of the things that, one of the ways to hold on to affordability is that a lot of stuff that gets done with tax credits is required to hold on to affordable units for 15 years, 40 years. It depends on the financing. I mean, the financing is contingent on holding on to affordability. Those tend to be bigger projects. Those tend to be 50-unit projects. They're not the sort of projects you're talking about here. There are also regulations in communities that, and Cincinnati has one, they're working on enforcement right now, that it's called, oh my God, John Schreider would kill me right now from legal aid. You can't, homeowners or landlords can't discriminate based on your ability to pay, or the way that you pay. If I can pay with a voucher, if I can pay with a check, you need to rent to me regardless. That is not the law, but in some local municipalities, people are starting to say, we're going to require you to take, if somebody can pay you $1,000 for your unit, and that's what it's on the market for, if it's a voucher or if it's a check, you need to take it. That's not true across the board.
How do you regulate that?
Yeah.
Well, with the local ordinance is how Cincinnati does it.
Yeah.
And it tends to be local ordinances, which means you got to decide you're going to do it and create a local ordinance that does it, and then you got to enforce on it. Cincinnati is challenged sometimes to enforce on things like that.
Would that only be in situations where the landlord got funding to do upgrades or?
No, not necessarily
Okay.
in the case, and I will look for the regulation in Cincinnati and send it to you just so you can see what it looks like. If you have a unit on the market, you have to take whatever compensation people will give you. You have to take $1.95. If it's $1,000, you got to take $1,000 either in a check or in a voucher. Now,
I'm assuming it would be like the proof of income section on a rental application, right? Can't
yeah,
ask.
I can't believe I can't see these words, but they're not coming to me.
All right.
Sorry, John.
He'll call you later. The network of support, the referral listing, that feels like a really great thing that we can create. The code enforcement with repair improvement plan, I love that. But of course, it connects with dollars that.
And that's where I think you would want to lean on Hamilton County. Initially, I think they'll have resources available. If I were the county, I would say I want you to bring resources to the table as well, but I don't know, I don't know what the regulations are going to be to access those funds in the short term. I think it will be, the county is anxious to get that up and running. So I think that's something that you would want Mike or Noah to work with the county on and be ready when they're ready to make those resources available. Because it's going to be available to communities who have their act together and are ready to go.
Okay. And is there a name for
That
that?
I know, but I'm
Okay.
sure there is.
But saying code enforcement with repair improvement plan, it
Yes.
would be the
Yes.
tagline, okay. And those funds are separate from the PWC
That's
federal
right.
funds? Okay.
Yeah.
So one thing that I did find out about PWC is that that money comes from the federal government and the city of Cincinnati gets this chunk and then Hamilton County gets this. But all of Hamilton County has to share, except for Cincinnati, has to share
That's right, yeah.
that smaller pile. So Norwood residents are eligible for those PWC funds, but much less so than the city of Cincinnati. And I talked to Noah about trying to find out how Norwood could get, a bigger slice of that.
Have a dedicated fund that was available to your residents is I think what you really want. And as I said, I think that's coming. I wish I could be more articulate about it. Somebody from the county certainly could.
Okay. What department would that be in at the
Community
county?
development, it would be Maria Collins, who I think is going to manage that. And I also think Lisk is going to be providing technical support as well. So again, you know Kristen, you know Valerie, those are going to be good resources.
Okay. And the next, what do you guys think about involving, like, trying to get community input on some of these? What do you think would be the best? Would it be just to have another housing meeting and make it public, that let's have a more of a discussion? Would it be a town hall?
Yeah, I would, leaning more towards town hall. Kind of open. And maybe like the first one, like, hey, we're just going to talk about this aspect. Just focus on one thing.
I'm volunteering Valerie here, but I mean,
I'd have her name. I was going to give her a call and
If you
see.
wanted to start with accessory dwelling units, which feels like a reasonable starting place, you could have Valerie talk about it. And you could have her show you what models look like and you could see it. I mean, it sounds, until you look at something, it's like, whoa, wait a minute, I can't even tell. I don't even, I think it helps sometimes for people to see things.
And at the town hall, I mean, we can talk to Noah, but coming to the table administration-wise. If we wanted to start a pilot program in Norwood and see
What
that would look like and bring administration to it to say, okay, these are the things that would have to be done within the city.
And Mike is always a good resource when it comes to the zoning code, for sure.
Yeah.
Okay, well, what I can do is I'll talk to Valerie, Noah, and Mike, and see about getting that on the calendar, maybe for the July.
Sounds good.
And then I'm wondering if we could ask Lisa to work on the network of support, if that's something that we could task her with.
I can send her some contacts at the school too. That would be good.
Yeah.
I was just going to say, so the 11th, which is not this Saturday, but next Saturday, there's a thing, the city's doing a housing thing, and I know Valerie's doing a session.
I'm going.
The housing
on
summit?
aging in place and accessory dwelling
Yeah, the housing
units.
summit?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'll be there.
We're both there.
She's deep in the topic, and I know there's a panel that's going to talk very much about that.
Great. Oh,
So
that's
I would
perfect.
say definitely go and get a little preview, because she spent a lot of time with all kinds of experts, and I would say she's becoming an expert, so.
Yes, I'm looking forward to that. And they had free childcare.
And they have free time.
It's at 9 in the morning on a Saturday. Do they have free coffee? That's,
I think the answer is yes.
I'm guessing. I can also talk with Maria Collins with Hamilton County about the code enforcement, and to Mike and Noah about
She'll be able
that.
to be much more articulate about that than I.
Okay. Anybody here interested in looking in the lenders? Alexis, does that sound like fun for you? Jeez.
I can cold call banks.
Okay. Well, have you met with the real estate?
I was gonna say, don't call callbacks, call
I'm
the
just kidding.
board, yeah.
I'm
call the
I'm
board
joking.
realtors And figure out from them, who they think the lenders are in this sector.
I can send you their contact info. She's Deborah.
Yeah, Deborah, yeah.
I met with Deborah. She's great.
I was gonna say, I feel like I've met with somebody too, if I have some additional contact information, I'll send it to you too.
They have a really
Deborah.
long acronym that's
Yeah.
REIGC.
Yeah.
Doesn't stick in the brain at all, but Deborah. Awesome, okay, I think
I
we're,
mean, you guys could be a great pilot for a lot of this, I mean, Norwood's really well positioned, you have such a strong housing market, you're so centrally located, you could be a good model for other communities.
That would
And
be
we're
really
small
cool.
enough to start
Yeah.
that process too. And figure out what works and doesn't work, and I just keep trying to say, like, let's just test it out. Let's see
Yeah,
what works. It's not.
That's right.
It's not concrete, it's not, this is definite, let's figure it out and
That's right.
go from there.
I can also I'll email you guys the pilot program it's a case study, excuse me, it's not that long ago. There's not a year on it, there it is. Oh, I lied, 2008. So that's now old stuff.
Valerie might have new numbers.
Probably.
I
It was just a
will
case
send
study.
you, I'm going to make myself a note to send you the old housing studies I've done for Norwood.
I stayed in accessory housing this weekend.
Did you?
I did. A tiny home.
I've done it a couple times, and it's
very
always
nice.
been, yeah. I've one in Florida, one in Portland. Actually, I was in an RV out west, which was pretty trippy. And a yurt, that was also an accessory dwelling. I've been in a whole bunch of them. And for the most part, they're very lovely part that they don't feel like a creepy shed in the back that's, yeah.
Yeah, you don't want them to be a creepy shed in the back,
no,
for sure.
They've
Yeah.
all been really, really lovely, so I can see that being a really good option for us.
Just like that support of multi-generational living, and I think it just keeps coming up. It keeps coming up
Yeah.
with people like, I need to move out of this house, I can't, I mean.
And one of
I
the
think
things that happens when seniors don't move out of those houses is there's no room for new families.
families,
You
yeah.
want to support seniors and you want room for new families. So
Yeah.
it's like you're accomplishing both of those things,
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's also my plan
And-
to move into my kid's backyard.
Yeah. And you're making it more affordable for everybody without building affordable housing. But it is.
Yeah.
Fantastic, okay. So I will write up the notes and I guess do you want to schedule something now or wait till we get things a little more underway?
Let's, after the summit,
Yeah, that's a good
let's
idea.
see information that we
Yeah.
get from there, see if we need to meet with Valerie or Noah or Mike more.
Tell Valerie I volunteer.
And see how we feel at that point, if we're comfortable scheduling a town hall,
Do it then.
or if we need to, bring some more people to the table before we do that.
All right, sounds good.
And I'm around, you know where I live.
I know where to find you. All right, thank you very much. It was a great meeting.
Yeah, thank you. It was nice.